Supervisor Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move that we amend Supervisor Johnson's recommendation in such a way that the chosen individual only serve until such time as a special election can be held to duly elect someone to that office. And after the second, I'd like to retain the mic as well, please.
All right, is there a second for that? Seconded by Supervisor Byrd. Back to you.
Since 2005, there have been 12 appointments to the county board. I understand that special elections can be costly, but in this instance, it can be scheduled with an already existing election cycle, having minimal financial impact to the taxpayers. Given the shenanigans that occurred with the April 2014 election for District 9, the votes cast for Mr. Laundrie were effectively nullified. The last time the residents of District 9 had a vote that actually counted was April 3, 2012. Appointing a supervisor until April of 2016 means that not a single individual will have a vote counted for District 9 supervisor in over 4 years. No votes that actually have meaning in over 4 years. I believe the majority of the La Crosse County Board believes the residents of District 9 not only deserve to have their votes counted, but to have their votes count. Therefore, I ask all supervisors to support the amendment to the motion so that we can hold a special election so the residents of District 9 can have a duly elected representative rather than one that is handed to them from those who do not reside in their district. I would also request that we do a computer vote on the amendment.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Supervisor Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to raise a point of order that I believe that there are two problems with what Mr. Hoffman is trying to do. Number one is I think that his amendment is not germane to the motion because it completely nullifies what the intent is, which is to appoint a person for the duration of the term. Secondly, I believe it's a violation of the open meetings law. We are noticed today for an appointment. We are not noticed today for an election, or the calling of an election. I guess I have a question for Mr. Hoffman. Did you talk to the chair? Did you inform the chair that you were going to be making this amendment tonight?
I didn't have opportunity to do that. I have been in conversation with Corporate Counsel Lang regarding this today, trying to make sure that I had all of my ducks in a row. And according to Corporate Counsel, state statute does specify that the county chair does appoint the replacement unless the county board order a special election.
Okay, thank you. That's a very long answer to my question, which is whether you showed the chair the courtesy of letting her know that you were going to do this tonight. This is a really unfortunate way to start the session because it's a very adversarial way of doing it. You know, last Friday we had our county board, what I call retreat, what chair calls advance, where we talked about roles and we talked about respect. And we talked about how the process works. And you had perfect opportunity at that point or any time in the 72 hours since to give her notice that you were going to do this. And it's really unfortunate that you decided to sandbag her by just bringing it up tonight. I have a problem with that. And secondly, I have a problem with the procedure of having a special election, which is, in general, I'm not opposed to a special election, but the procedure that has been used for the entire history of this county, to my knowledge, and I've been on this board for over a quarter century, has always been that it was the chair's appointment. There's nothing wrong with a special election, but so often what we see in these, what I'll call smaller elections, is that they don't get the attention that really is deserved. And, you know, the special election that you're calling for in your motion would occur in November, and if I remember correctly, there's some other interesting things on the calendar for this November election that are going to suck up all of the energy and all of the attention, and then you're going to have the county board race that nobody, other than perhaps whatever candidate runs, would pay any attention to. What we had here instead was a very transparent, very open, very deliberate, very public process of asking people to apply and then coming in where every board member had the opportunity to sit down and ask this person, these 4 people, questions and give their advice to the chair. And I think that's a very appropriate process to use. I think it's a very fair process. And I think that the people of the 9th District are well served by that process. I don't think our county is well served, however, by starting out the beginning of the session with what I will call, again, a stab in the back or a sandbagging of our chair by not talking to her beforehand to let her know that you were going to do this. So I believe that this is out of order, this amendment is out of order, and I would ask the chair to so rule. Thank you.
All right. Supervisor Doyle wants this to be ruled out of order, but I think I'd like to hear a little more from people before I decide on that. Supervisor Cruz.
Supervisor Hoffman, on his very first appearance on this board, is trying to change a precedent that has existed for many, many years. I was appointed in this very same way to my very first board position. Mr. Hoffman was also a candidate at that time who was not chosen and who had the grace not to try and challenge that decision at that time, because he knew that he would have another chance to come and run for office, and he did, and he is now here. And that is the way to do it. That is the process, how we get here when we aren't chosen for by the chair. Now, if somebody is a sore loser and doesn't like that decision, they just have to run next time around. Too bad Supervisor Ebert isn't here tonight, because I don't very often ascribe higher powers to him, but I think maybe he was clairvoyant the other day when he said, when he made it very clear to those of us who were there and were part of that interview committee, that it is the chair's prerogative to appoint any supervisors that need to be appointed midterm, at the beginning term, whatever. And I think that is our precedent, and I think that's what we should stick with. And I totally agree with Supervisor Doyle that this motion is out of order.
Thank you. I saw Supervisor Berg's hand up. I'm seeing Veenstra and Berg. All right, Supervisor Berg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I do think there is an election in August, so I'm not certain if there were a special election that would have to go to November. I think there will be some primaries on the ballot in August, but that's just a side point. I do think that to have some sympathy for the voters in District 9 is appropriate, given the fact that because of the method that was used in vacating the seat. And so, although I think the Corporation Council rules on whether that particular motion is in order or not in order, I certainly would like to register my displeasure with the way the seat was vacated.
I'd like to ask County Clerk about the August question.
I've been in discussion with Corp Counsel Dave Lang today, and I think the statutes are very clear that before June 1st, if a special election is called, it's to be held with the November election. I know there's an August primary, and if a primary is necessary, that would be held with the August primary. Now, I'm to assume there's probably going to be more than 2 candidates that would file to run for this office. And I just want to point out how complicated and how complex the August primary ballot already is. I actually brought a couple samples with me of how big this ballot can get. If you're putting a nonpartisan primary on an August primary ballot, that is going to be full because there's a couple incumbents for state offices that are not running, and there's 7 to 10 people right now running for each of those offices. This office will get lost at the back of the ballot. It will be put at the end of the ballot. Right now, we do what we can to help the voters to vote at this ballot. We ordered 40% more ballots for the August primary because of the issue with cross-voting and how many ballots get spoiled. Right now, we lay out our ballots so each of the parties are in columns. So the poll workers can tell the voters, you can vote in one column. District 9, they would have to say you can vote in one column, with the exception you can also vote at the back of the ballot. How many people would actually turn the ballot over to get to that contest? You know, that's something you have to ask yourself. And by no means am I advocating against special elections. I love elections. I love coding elections. I have the record for the most elections coded in the state of Wisconsin. But I'm also advocating for the voter and how confusing an August primary really is. And as Supervisor Doyle stated, that November ballot is full. And will it even get the attention it deserves by having it put on the back of the ballot? Because this contest will come at the very end of the ballot. So I'm neither advocating for or against this. It's obviously the pleasure of the board. But I want you to know how complicated it really will be to have a non-partisan primary on the August primary ballot. And I don't know if Dave wanted to touch on anything more with regards to what the statute says that this election can be held.
Here's all the advice I can get.
Well, the statute does say that if the board orders a special election during the period beginning on December 1st and ending on May 31st, which we're within, of the succeeding year, the special election shall be held on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November following the date of the order. And earlier on it says, the successor shall serve for the unexpired portion of the term to which the person is appointed, unless the board orders a special election to fill the vacancy, in which case the person appointed shall serve until his or her successor is elected and qualified.
That seems a little wishy-washy.
No, that's pretty clear.
Okay. All right. Supervisor Veenstra, thank you for those clarifications.
I just wanted to pipe in and somewhat concur with Supervisor Doyle about the process being important here and being fair to the chair and frankly to everybody who participated in the process last week in which the interviews took place, including the people who came to present. Obviously, when there's 4 people and only 1 person gets chosen, 3 people are going to be disappointed. However, nobody said at that time to the chair, this isn't the process we should be using. We should be having a short-term appointment in a special election. That would have been a courtesy that would have been fair to both the people applying, to the people participating in the interview process perhaps, and to the rest of the board. And I just think for that reason, we should go ahead with the appointment. I don't know about the out of order issue, to be honest. I probably rely on Mr. Lang's expertise in that regard. But I do think it's just common courtesy, and we should try and aim for that whenever we can.
Thank you. Supervisor Berg.
I did participate in the interview process. I agree it was an open process. I think that Ms.
Can you speak closer to your mic, please?
I did participate in the interview process. I do think that Ms. Caucutt is well qualified to serve as a member of the county board. However, I do agree with Supervisor Hoffman that I think it should be up to the voters of the 9th District to determine who represents them. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Before I get to Supervisor Ferries, I would like to ask Supervisor Johnson for clarification on the interview process. Do you believe you made it clear at the interview process that the appointment was to fill up the rest of the term?
Yes.
Okay. Supervisor? Okay. Supervisor Ferries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pardon me for not being as prepared as everybody else here. Yeah, if maybe the chair wasn't advised of this, but it seems like everybody else was. I don't think this is about the process or anything like that, or the person at all. I mean, I'm even excited to have somebody from my district, school district, representing the 9th District. But I do believe the same thing happened in Alaska, where a person took the oath of office and by the end of the meeting announced that will not live out the term. I don't think that's right to the voters. Like I say, it's certainly not anything against the individuals that were selected. But I do think it's important to let the voters make the choice instead of one person or the committee. So It's going to be an interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Logie, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would be good to point out that I think the word unfair is being thrown around a lot. As I understand it, I believe Ms. Caucutt would serve until the special election. Is that not the?
That's in the amendment that Supervisor.
Yes, that's my
Hoffman
understanding. So the process did work. There is somebody filling that seat in an interim capacity, but given the situation, the vacancy occurred, the way in which it occurred, having an election for the majority of the term, I think that's due respect to the voters. I would also say I think I'm confident that a voter can figure out how to turn over a ballot. I think a voter can figure out how to vote, and so as we're throwing around the word unfair, I think the process was absolutely fair, and I think what would be fair to the voter is to give them an opportunity to weigh in a special election in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Anyone who has not spoken before? All right, back to you, Supervisor Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would simply like to point out to the county board that the message that we risk sending to the general public is one of, you cannot vote. The votes were nullified by the process that was taking place in April. We're looking at 4,000 people having no choice in who their supervisor was, having cast no vote that actually counts in over 4 years. With all of the stuff we've seen in the news media about disenfranchising voters and making it more difficult for voters to vote, do we as a body really want to send the message to the residents in District 9 or the rest of La Crosse County that we know better than the voters and that we do not want the voters to actually have the ability to vote?
Thank you, Supervisor Hoffman. Supervisor Cable.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to disagree with Supervisor Hoffman. I think we're following a protocol that was well-defined, very clear from the get-go about how this process was to go. That being said, I guess I have a question for Supervisor Hoffman. Have you actually gotten any calls from citizens of District 9 that they have been unhappy with the process that we followed?
I have not had contact with anyone. I have not had any contact with citizens from District 9. I'm a firm believer that every resident in the county should have the ability to have their vote count and have it mean something. And in this instance, the residents of District 9 will not have had a meaningful vote in over 4 years if we do not approve this amendment.
So no, you didn't get any calls. Supervisor Cable, the floor is still yours. Do you wish to proceed?
I want to support the process that took place. I was a part of that process. I thought it was fair. We gave adequate notice to the public about what that process was going to be. Anybody who was interested in running for that open seat had an opportunity to submit their interest. And through the interview process, we gave Chair Tara Johnson our feedback, and from what I can tell, everybody was in agreement with that process right from the beginning all the way through the end of the process. So I support the appointment of Nancy tonight.
Thank you. Supervisor Scheller.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is directed to Corporate Councilor Dave Lang. As a freshman county supervisor, we've had many meetings up to this point about communications outside meetings. I mean, is this any violation? Obviously, there's been communications outside of this meeting regarding this matter. I wasn't informed of it. And, I mean, I would like to be edified as to whether that communication was proper, and I can confide with other council members in group as to what we'd like to have happen at meetings.
Mr. Lang.
Well, I guess that would depend upon whether you had a walking quorum. So, I mean, you can, but you have to be careful how many people get involved. So, you can't really answer it was a violation, but we should try to avoid having that kind of communication with more than one council member or having a walking quorum happen. So, we should keep that to a minimum.
Supervisor Johnson, you wish to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to remind my colleagues that regardless of whether it passed your sniff test or not, the April 1st, there were no laws broken when the April 1st election was held. And while I might not agree with how the District 9 position played out in the election cycle, there was nothing illegal about it. And when voters elect dead people, as they have done in states like Missouri and other places, knowing that the person died and they still get elected, I do not buy into what I perceive to be the false logic of 4 years of disenfranchisement of voters in the 9th District if this appointment makes it all the way through to the end of the term as I am requesting. So that's my first point. The second is, my frustration this evening is the lack of courtesy, but even more than that, where was the righteous indignation on April 18th when notice was posted that we were going to fill this vacancy for the remainder of the term? Where was the righteous indignation when that deadline for applications was extended because of the Easter holiday? Where was the righteous indignation when the interviews were held and nothing was said about the fact that we were filling a vacancy for the remainder of the term? Where was the righteous indignation then? In 2008, several of us in this room were here at that time. Supervisor then Pat Shippers from whatever district it was numbered back then, I'm sorry I don't know the number, was sworn into office on April 15th, 2008, and at the end of that meeting declared his intent to resign effective May 1st of that year. We followed the Doyle model, we appointed a replacement, and we moved on. This is a process that we have used regardless of when vacancies have occurred. And my frustration, I apologize for my volume being loud right now, but there absolutely is a disconnect between what is communicated and how in this room and what is communicated by us in this room outside as we conduct our business. And I just frankly am very frustrated. We have a very qualified applicant. We have voters in the 9th District who did get out to vote in an election that was legally held and conducted, and we have an applicant who is ready to serve the 9th District. And I respectfully request that we approve this appointment and move on with the business before us tonight.
Thank you. I have Supervisor Holtz, who has not spoken yet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would request at this time that the Corporation Council answers Supervisor Doyle's point of order and declare if this is in order or not, this motion.
I was getting to that. Mr. Lang, can you talk about the out of order?
Closer question. I don't. To me, I think it's germane because it's certainly relevant to the vacancy and when it expires. I think the closer issue, which I hadn't really thought about, and Mr. Hoffman did contact me and said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Is this the right way to do it? And I helped with that. And I think that's probably the closer issue. I have to say it. I don't think it violates the open meetings. Our meeting says appoint Nancy Stoll Caucutt as County Board Supervisor for a term to begin immediately and expire April 18, 2016 to fill the vacancy created by the resignation. If this is just a motion to change the expiration date, there'd be no question that it's appropriate. What makes it a little closer question is because it's not just changing the date, it's also saying and calling for a special election, which is pretty major. But you really only there's only two choices. It's either fill the unexpired term or we have a special election. I mean, that's all we'll ever be in this case. So I guess my conclusion is I don't think it does violate it. I know it's a closer question, so you can come out either way, and I respect what Attorney Doyle, Supervisor Doyle says about it also, but that's how I'd come down upon it. The chair makes the ruling on it. If people want to challenge that, you can challenge it. It's a majority vote, so that's what I think.
Thank you very much. I have 3 more names on here, all of whom have spoken previously. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for the first time? All right, Supervisor Veenstra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just don't understand the idea that voters were disenfranchised. You know, only one person ran for the office. If you're going to say they were disenfranchised, then arguably anybody who ever resigns and had an election that they didn't have an opponent in is somehow disenfranchising the voters of their district. Not everybody can make it through a term. I mean, nobody ran against Mr. Landry. They had no other choice. I suppose they could have had a write-in if they wanted to. Who knows what his reasoning was for when he moved or whatever. It's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate too. Who wants to do that? I don't think even he probably wanted to. But the idea that the voters were disenfranchised is just poppycock. They'll have 2 years. Ms. Caucutt can serve for the 2 years, and they'll have their chance with whoever decides to run. Nobody else ran against him, so they got who they got, and he had to resign. It's sad, but true.
Thank you, Supervisor Burke.
Well, to me, it's the question, the vote is very important, and if voters did not have the knowledge that the person was not going to be serving the term, it's a question of, to me, what is that? You know, what are they doing with their vote? So it is a question about the integrity of the vote, I think.
Thank you. Supervisor Doyle.
Well, I certainly agree with Supervisor Veenstra and strongly disagree with Supervisor Burke on this, but I do have a question for Corporation Counsel. If in fact you happen to be wrong and this is a violation of the open meetings law, what is the penalty for a violation of the open meetings law in Wisconsin?
I'm not sure the exact penalty, but it's...
That each and every member of this body can be assessed with that penalty, is that correct?
Well, although I'm also giving advice, I don't think it is a violation of the open meetings law, so that would have a bearing on it also.
All right, having heard extensive discussion on this, the chair rules that the motion is not out of order because of the issue that Mr. Lang raised about it being noticed as filling a vacancy and that special election could still be involved in that. So therefore, we will vote on the amendment to change the appointment to serve until a special election is called. And we'll vote on the computer.
It is a portable computer.
You're right.
Can you explain the significance of a yes versus a no vote, please?
Okay, if you vote yes, you're agreeing with Supervisor Hoffman that a special election should be arranged. If you vote no, you're saying that the appointment process should proceed as suggested by Chair Johnson. Any other questions on that? Okay, sorry that took so long. I broke my ankle and I just got clumsy all over. Ginny, what's the result of the vote? The vote was 5 for the amendment, 19 against, so the amendment fails. Now, back to the motion to approve the appointment to fill the vacancy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Anything else?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yours.
Pascal, we've kept you waiting long enough. If you would be good enough to come to the front of the room along with Nancy to do the oath of office, please.